All right, everyone. Unfortunately, we have to report that Ebola cases are now rising again in Congo. For about a month and a half or so there, I think the number of new cases was slowing. Now it's not anymore. It's gone back up. It looks like their ability to stop the disease by rapidly inoculating people with this vaccine they've got has failed. The death rate is still high. I mean, basically what happens is if they get you the treatment, if they get you the Ebola treatment in time, it can lower the death rate to single digits, which means it's actually very effective. The problem is once a person has started to show even flu-like symptoms, which most of the time you don't know that they have anything till they do, the death rate goes up to the mid upper 20s. It's like 1 in 4 or 1 in 3 will die. That's still a very high death rate. That's on par with smallpox. If you wait longer and they show secondary symptoms, they start bleeding out of every orifice, it's still a 50-50 chance they die. Even when you administer treatment, it doesn't drop that far below it. So it's a scary disease. The big scary thing is that it can mutate. We already know that from the last epidemic. It is capable of becoming more able to live outside the human body. Normally, Ebola can only survive for a few hours on surfaces under most conditions. It's not that durable outside of the human body. It's not spread through actual airborne means. It's spread through droplets mainly or direct contact with the body. The ability, therefore, for it to spread from person to person isn't extremely high. It's capable of replicating itself. It should, by all means, be easy to contain, but so far there hasn't been... They didn't put enough effort into it. Early on, they said, well, it's just another Ebola outbreak. It happens every other year. Don't worry about it too much. And so they didn't declare it an emergency until it hit Goma, a city of 1 million people. Now it could be in Dar es Salaam, which is a city of 4.3 million people in a totally different country. And the number of new cases is now rising again. Well, that should probably concern people. Wasn't it about this time of year with the last outbreak that it really started to get rolling? Like it had been there for months anyway, but then all of a sudden it just started skyrocketing? Like what threshold do you have to reach before the virus inevitably mutates, becomes more durable, and fucks everything up? Imagine if it does that. Imagine if instead of being in some small town in Liberia that happens, with 10,000 people in it, so that it spreads around, but, you can mobilize resources before it really gets out of hand. And even then, 20, 30,000 people, the true total that died, because they openly admit that at least half of cases can't be counted because, of course, people weren't even delivering the bodies or the sick to the aid workers because they got afraid because they were burning the bodies. Imagine that it were to happen in a city of 1 million people or 4.3 million. With an international airport. Like Goma's international airport is like the equivalent of Burlington. We've got an international airport if you count flights to and from Montreal a couple times a day. But it's not really. It's not in the sense of Cleveland's airport or something over in the like London Heathrow Airport. It's not the same thing. But now it could be in a city of 4.3 million, a city with skyscrapers and highways and modern conveniences. A true international airport hub services places like, Cairo and Riyadh. So imagine that it mutates there in a city that densely populated. All hell will break loose. It'll cripple the Tanzanian economy. By the way, I know that it's technically, I think it's pronounced Tanzania, people were saying, not Tanzania. You know what I mean, though. Who fucking cares? The problem is that in a city like that especially, you have some medical infrastructure, but travel and trade has far outstripped medicine. The problem for places like Central Africa is that you have a booming population and rapidly advancing modes of communication and transport without an attendant investment into medicine. That's why when an Ebola outbreak happens, most of the aid is foreign. Most of the response happens, the WHO comes in, Doctors Without Borders comes in. They administer the response in coordination with local teams that, by and large, are just volunteer nurses. By and large, people with little to no actual medical training. There are no native facilities there in most parts of Africa to deal with a case of Ebola. And you have no administration of vaccines. You have no serum. The only thing that you can do is treat people topically. Make sure that they don't die of dehydration. Make sure basically that secondary causes don't kill them. The Ebola, you can't do anything about the Ebola. If you're in an African Ebola ward, the only thing they can do is keep you from starving to death, bleeding out so severely that the blood loss kills you, or making sure that you don't dehydrate because of the loss of fluids from shitting and pissing yourself constantly. They can keep you hydrated, they can give you blood transfusions, and that's basically it. Give you some fucking ibuprofen to keep the fever down, I guess. This should concern a lot more people. I keep warning people that it's much more dire than you think. You've got more and more of these Ebola epidemics, by the way. It's a matter of time before some patient zero occurs that has some mutated variant of this. It could be someone you've tried giving the serum to. You killed off all the weaker Ebola that was inside of them. Now the Ebola's gotten a little stronger. The next generation's stronger. And through this refining process of evolution, how wonderful it is, and we know that it's evolution capable. We've seen it in the last outbreak several times already mutate totally into a much more durable variant and then an asymptomatic variant. We've already seen it evolve before our very eyes. They're applying outside pressure to it in an evolutionary sense. It's going to backfire. They're going to fuck the whole world. Millions will probably die, maybe billions. It's a matter of time before it happens. Not saying it's Ebola, not saying it's with this outbreak. It will eventually, inevitably happen with some disease somewhere in the world in the future. It could be this outbreak, or it could be the next one, or it could happen 20 years from now. All odds favor it being sooner rather than later. Higher world density, the population density of the world is massively higher than it has been in the past, and it's rising at a very fast clip, especially in areas that tend to be prone to tropical disease. Places like Central and West Africa, places like Southeast Asia. Tropical disease is endemic in these regions, and you're pumping them full of people and not pumping them full of hospitals. What could go wrong? What could possibly go wrong? Sanitation, what the fuck is that? Dar es Salaam has it. They have a modern sewage system, I'm sure, with a city of that particular caliber, but does Butembo? No, not really. I mean, it's decent by Central African standards. You look at it on a map, it looks fairly nice. You might want to go take a trip there if it didn't have Ebola at the moment. But it's not a modern city. It doesn't have, there's no skyscraper and street lamp sort of thing. There's some paved roads, and that's, it's got a highway. Goma, same thing. Most of it's tin shacks. Look at Goma, the whole big chunk of that city. There are probably 200,000 people just in that one shantytown area. Nothing more than, the homes are probably as big as this office, maybe smaller in some cases. Tin roofs, clapboard siding, not heated or cooled, no plumbing or anything like that. They might have a little solar panel out front that powers a light bulb or something for a few hours at night so that the kids can study, and that's basically all they got. Feel sorry for people because their governments have let them down. Their governments are too busy investing in guns or in finery for their own families to give a shit about the people. And the world community doesn't give a shit. They had to wait till it got to Goma to declare an international health emergency. So yeah, the Ebola will probably mutate at some point. You've got more new cases now. It's growing at a faster clip. No apparent containment. Well, I was hoping there for a little while it looked like they were starting to get it under containment. The number of new cases, it was claimed, was beginning to drop. Now we find out that's not the case. Well, that's sad. With every new case you have, you get more new cases in the next viral generation, potentially, until you've contained it in some way. It looks like they've failed so far. That's about all. Peace out.